innovate, membership, partnership, agility, communicate, trust. That's impact. A 12-week intensive syllabus for innovative, industrious and inspiring association board leaders. Visit associationtransformation.org for more details and to register for our next programme. Cohorts commence in February, May and September 2021. Impact, a signature programme delivered in partnership by Consult Strategy and Brewer Pratt Solutions.
Well, hello and welcome to Association Transformation. I am really excited about today's transatlantic conversation. I know Andrew's not as excited, but I come from a government affairs background and politics and campaigning. And so Andrew can just roll his eyes all day today
Hang on a second.
and put up with it.
I did politics at university. I got 2 degrees in politics, and I did
You
US
did?
politics as well, actually. So I'm very interested
you have a
in this
degree in
subject.
US? You have a degree in US politics?
Yeah, and US history. Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, then you can be on the panel today,
So
too.
you'd all now be thinking, "Oh God, am I saying the right thing now? Is he going to know I'm actually just bluffing?" So
Oh,
I'm
crap.
totally.
I can't just wing it. Well, we do have some experts with us today. The goal was really to talk about the impact of elections and how associations harness the power of government affairs and advocacy, not just to deliver value and benefit to their membership or to their constituency, but to really have an impact and make a difference on the issues relevant to their mission and to their organization. We don't want to get wrapped up in all the bigger politics and all the embarrassing activities in the American political spectrum. We really are here to focus on associations' potential power and impact as a collective voice of members. And to help us dive into that, I've invited an old friend and a new friend, Marco Giamberardino, Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the National Electrical Contractors Association. Good morning, Marco. I know we go way, way back. And we are also thankful to have with us a new friend for me, a longtime friend for you, but Frank McCarthy, founder and principal of McCarthy Advanced Consulting. So we've got someone on the inside of associations and someone now more on the lobbying side working on behalf of associations to give us some perspective on the impact that elections can have and what government affairs on behalf of associations looks like these days. I mean, with COVID, with how divided the country is and the world, what does it look like to support an association through a government affairs initiative? I mean, Marco, this is your day in and day out job. How important is government affairs to your association these days?
Well, first of all, thanks, Elisa, for this. It's always good to be with you and to meet the rest of your team and to be with Frank. I've been in associations for over 25 years now, and certainly at our association, when I came on board, I would probably tell you government affairs was not in the top tier of what we did necessarily. But I think as time has progressed and the value of what our association provides holistically, it has absolutely grown by leaps and bounds. We have a very active membership at all levels of both the policy and the politics side of things. Our members are very engaged in sharing their experiences and what it means to them, to decision makers, both at the federal, state, and local levels. They're very active, especially locally, from city boards to state, working the state capitals, and certainly very involved with us. We have a very vigorous political action committee, one of the top ones in the construction industry and in DC overall. And we also are seeing a very significant increase in advocacy with respect to increases in meetings, showing up to our legislative conference. Our fly-in has grown more than probably 225% over the last 8 to 10 years.
Wait a minute, stop the presses. You guys are shaking hands and knocking on doors and having meetings even in kind of this new COVID era. How is that working?
we've adjusted just like the way everybody else has. We've gone from knocking on doors and visiting, having members of Congress visiting chapter offices and contractor offices and job sites to doing Zoom meetings. For example, one of the first ones I can recall, our San Diego chapter sat down with a couple of the members of their delegation and did a multiple series of Zoom meetings and shared screenshots with us, reported back on what they were doing. And a lot of our chapters followed suit. They never missed a beat during COVID.
So COVID hasn't stalled or suppressed your members' kind of willingness to be active or willingness to reach out to their elected officials?
Definitely not. I would say it's at least maintained, if not, we've gotten other people and newer people engaged too, because with all the decision making and all the activity with respect to COVID relief packages and all the programs that went along with that, and Frank and I worked a ton together on this on behalf of our membership. We've seen more engagement in learning about the programs, communicating what they need with respect to, say, the PPP program, how it affects them, questions they had, how do they implement it, how do they qualify, how do they apply. I mean, we just saw just a really rapid increase over the last year with respect to the policy making aspects of advocacy.
Well, Andrew will probably recall we spoke to some colleagues in Australia, and they were saying that associations' positioning had actually been elevated by COVID because government was looking to the associations to give voice to their industry and how COVID was impacting these industries. And I'd like to think that's the case here in the United States, that nonprofits are considered expert voices that the elected officials are turning to. Frank, for your clients, are your clients being drawn upon as experts and voices for their professions and their industries and their communities as it relates to COVID-related legislation and recovery planning?
Yes, absolutely. And let me first echo what Marco said. Andrew, Elisa, thank you so much for having us on today. We greatly appreciate it. And we think it's an important time to be doing so, especially for the association world. So I represent not just trade associations like the National Electrical Contractors Associations, but I also represent folks in the nonprofit world as well as labor unions. And during this COVID, I don't know if I've ever seen more heightened activity on behalf of membership, especially those that everybody's directly impacted by it, right? But those folks who are being forced out of work, who want to go back to work, what is the government doing at the state, local, and federal level to put something together so that I can go to work, create that atmosphere so that I can continue with my career. So as Marco alluded to, despite the fact that it's changed and we've had to adapt to that, there's definitely been a lot more activity. And Capitol Hill is different too, right? You can't do face-to-face meetings. Members of Congress, even when they're here, you can't just go to the congressional office buildings as you had in the past. Instead, that's a lot of Zoom calls or conference calls. But they are very much welcoming input. They want to hear what, you have in the House and the Senate, essentially 535 laymen, right? They're experts on certain things, but not everything. And restoring the economy during an unprecedented disaster, I don't think anybody's an expert on that. So they were welcoming a lot of input coming from various industries and trade associations. So we were happy to lend some expertise where we could.
Well, I hate to ask Andrew this since they're on a pretty serious and harsh lockdown, but how are things going advising the government in London?
Well, you need a government that's actually going to listen to you to be able to advise it. It's. I find it fascinating. I really do. I mean, I love to hear about the work that you guys are doing over there, because, like as you said, when we spoke to Tony, when we had the podcast, and our colleagues in Australia, and we were talking about the role that associations are playing to advance the interests of professions and the development of policy. We're terrible at it in this country. We're awful. There are some exceptional beacons of innovative practice, but generally, I think that there's an unhealthy skepticism in the UK as to the role that associations should play. Not least because I think there is a question mark as to whether the government would even listen. But actually, I think that's unfair because right now that might be the case. But I think in the past, when we've had other governments in office, I think there has been they have demonstrated a willingness to engage with professional communities. But I think generally people seem to get a sense that there's not much, and I don't understand why this is the case. There's not much value in it. Now, personally, I think engaging with at government in both local and national level is critical, as you guys recognise. But I think trying to articulate to associations in this country the value of it is really problematic. So I mean, I'm curious as to how do we measure the impact? How do we measure the value that engaging in government affairs brings to an association or a profession? That's what I'm really curious about.
It's funny. I feel like that's our challenge here, even with a more receptive government and maybe a more sophisticated government affairs template. I still think that's the challenge here. And I know as I've advised clients about member value and engaging non-members to recruit, you never lead with government affairs because it's so hard to quantify. And it's something that the non-members will often know that you're going to do whether they're a member or not. There's a free rider component to this. And government affairs is always that tricky space where you can have your biggest wins, but how do you translate that into member growth because of the free ridership or simply because it's hard to quantify killing a bill? You kill a bill that saves your members from a new regulation or a new tax or some new a government oppression. How do you quantify that in a way that shows them that their membership is worth it? And Marco, I know we fight this all the time, especially in the construction space, when often you're representing companies in a regulatory environment.
I've got a few thoughts on this. With respect to what Andrew mentioned about the challenge of proving the value, I think that's in the US, certainly one of the reasons I think we're seeing a shift is because it's a generational shift. I think, frankly, our generation, certainly speaking for myself, I'm in my early 50s. I don't think our generation is as much, we're really joiners all that much. I think we'll get to that point as we start to get a little older and realize we need to rely on our peers a lot more. I think that's going to change. I feel like the younger set that's coming up now, maybe even the post-millennials, are going to see the value of this again. But it's a different world in terms of your average association member. I think what I would always consider the traditional constituency, they're used to planning their trips around association meetings, their family vacations. They've made it part of their lives, especially the very active ones. I don't think we see that much right now with our generation, where we want to be home with our families. We don't want to go on a trip with a bunch of our competitors and colleagues. We want to have that time to ourselves. But I think we're going to see a shift there on both with our group and I think with the younger set. With respect to measuring and communicating the impact of what we do on government affairs, that's been one of our biggest challenges. First of all, I think the biggest challenge is proving the negative. Oh, we killed that bill, so you're never going to get hurt by it. It's how you communicate it. And the way we do it is we meet with our members, of course, in person before COVID. We did it all the time. I probably spent the better part of 20 weeks on the road to 25 weeks on the road on average before COVID. Even if it meant just going to an overnight to a chapter meeting to communicate what we're doing and really giving examples of regulations that we help kill or change or legislation that we help kill or modify, and really lay out the ROI and try to speak to our contractors because they're business owners really in quantifiable terms. We didn't just pass a highway bill. we passed a highway bill that has X billion dollars of work over X number of years that you're going to be able to bid on when your DOTs at the state level receive that money. You can bid on that job, not just, oh, we passed a big highway bill. We with respect to a prevailing wage repeal, for example, we'll say, hey, Congress tried to repeal this X number of times. We were able to defeat it not only X number of times, but we were able to grow support for this policy issue, showing how many more co-sponsors or how many more people voted with us. So it's really digging down deep and trying to play with the numbers in a meaningful way and showing that value to our members as what we're doing on a daily basis.
Frank, do you often have clients that ask you to help kind of do that quantification or create those equations that might allow them to communicate that value? I mean, I'm sure as you're helping them with the relationships and the conveyance of a policy position, are people asking for this? Do they know they need to do the type of things that Marco's talking about?
Yeah, and it's not, I'm a big fan of analytics, and we use that a lot of times in what we bring to Capitol Hill. In our lobbying, there's a lot of times where you can just take information about, your membership's effect on the economy or how safety would be increased exponentially with this regulation or that regulation. But it's hard to quantify, the value that government affairs brings in a way that you could just, put onto a spreadsheet. So instead, you have to be able to, it's more of a narrative, right? This is the threat that is out there and we need your engagement. After you've gotten them engaged, were you able to get a win from that, whether it's defeating a piece of legislation or getting a piece of legislation passed? And then that is something that you can show value to, but it's not something you're going to be able to do overnight. But you really have to first establish with them the benefit of being engaged, why you want to be engaged. And then once you've convinced them of doing that, you got to get some wins under your belt. And then after you do that, then there are some quantifiable things, as Marco was alluding to, right? What would the cost have been of this regulation? We can know what that is. We see this in security a lot of times, right? Homeland security, where if we neutralize a threat before something happens, well, it doesn't really make the news, right? But obviously, if that threat were to materialize and people were going to be hurt, then it becomes more of a blame game, right? So there is no credit for doing their job right, and there's plenty of blame if you get it wrong. Well, it's the same case in this, right? Is that you want to make sure that you're able to get enough credit for when you do win, and avoid having to take blame because you don't lose.
Well, and Frank, I think also to what you said about participation, this just isn't about getting members to join and people to pay their dues to an association. There's then that additional ask of, will you write a letter? Will you be on a Zoom call? Will you participate and give your name to this petition? Or, whatever it may be. Government affairs takes more than just a head count of members. Yes, it's powerful to say we represent 100,000 nurses or 50,000 construction workers or whatever your industry is, but you then need them to participate, to be present and active in your government affairs efforts. So membership is just the entry point. And then there's more to ask and require of them. So it's an even harder sell on that engagement side. And I wonder if the election helped that or hurt that. I mean, we have more people voted this election than ever before in at least the United States, the history of the United States. And I don't know what electoral numbers look like around the world, but for government affairs, does a divisive election, does it get more people at the membership level involved in the government advocacy?
Well, I would suggest, and I think you're posing this question to me, not to Marco, but for me, I saw a lot of what you did, right? We made it easier to vote. More people came out to vote. Similarly, you got to make it easy for your members to be able to be involved and be engaged, right? Social media campaigns. You were talking about sending a letter. Well, if you can basically pre-populate that letter and they really have to just click a link, put their information into it and send it, that makes it a lot easier than actually having them find a pen.
I sound so old saying send a letter.
If anything, sometimes you'll get members engaged, and you kind of have to have that balancing act, right? Of making sure that they don't get too engaged, right? Don't get into a Twitter war with the people that we're trying to influence, because that can happen quite a lot. And obviously, that stuff remains public and can really, in the mind of that lawmaker or that decision maker, you're branding an entire association, which are in with your interaction with them on social media. So you want to get them engaged in the right way, in a positive way, and make it fun, right? Marco was talking about some of the fly-ins and other things that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more and what the future of that is. But I think there's ways to make it fun and engaging. And one of the things NECA does really, really well is both their social media, and they've got some great folks that are over in their communications department, the videos that they put together to not just inform members, but to invite their feedback and allow that to be a communication method with decision makers and the administration on the Hill is really effective as well. And it's fun for that member to say, hey, look, I was in NECA's video last month, pushing for protection of our industry. And I think that that's a way that you pull them in and you help guide them through that, so you don't have what I was talking about before, which is, for lack of a better term, rogue membership.
Right.
Yeah, I would absolutely pick up on that. I think something that when I came on board at NECA, one of the things I noticed was we had a lot of folks who were they were financially invested, and they were also invested in terms of their time. But we wanted to, how do we grow that? My mantra to the team was, let's make it easy. Make it as easy as possible for our members to be engaged. Because I think you introduce a new member of any kind from any association to the advocacy world and to the political process, I think they find it intimidating. And I think one of the things we've done is we've walked our members. We make a very personal experience. We invite them to the Hill. We sit down with them, do really good overarching briefings on the process. We take them around and walk them, well, back when we could walk them around Capitol Hill. We even expanded not just our regular annual fly-in that we spring, but about 4 or 5 years ago, we started something new called our Next Gen meeting. And that was a way of we created a small 20 to 25 person, capped it always, fly-in, and this was first timers only. If you've never been to DC or never been to a legislative conference, that's the meeting for you. And we put you through a 2-day training program, take you to the Hill. We bring in folks like Frank and other experts, talk about the process, bring in members of Congress, just very casual sort of settings. And every single one of those folks who've been through that program said, I never thought it would be this easy. I was intimidated. I'm going to come back, and they've all come back time and time again. And I think that's a great tool to keep members and grow your base of advocates over the long term.
When you're talking, however, I'm conscious that we're talking it feels like we're talking about advocacy at that kind of macro level. How do we? I mean, an organisation like yourselves, the national electrical contractors, they must have so many internally within that association, within that professional network, so many different competing priorities, but also views of the world that are quite adverse to one another. So potentially, how do you prioritize? How do you work out when you can speak with one voice on behalf of an industry or a profession? Because I think a lot of the times I get a sense people are afraid to voice to articulate a shared voice, because there's a fear that actually it's not a shared voice, and therefore we're going to trip ourselves up. So how do you even begin to sort of take that apart and prioritize?
I think the first thing is really, keep the members engaged. We have like many associations, we have a policy committee or a government affairs committee. It's made up of about 15 members from across the country. They're appointed by our national president. They generally serve at least 1 to 2 years on the committee, some longer. They are chosen based on which geographic part of the country they represent. And we engage that committee quite often on some, pretty tough issues. We also, sometimes we just pick up the phone and I'll call a chapter manager and I'll say, hey, we've got this. What do you think? How's this going to affect you? Obviously, I think in any organization, and I think as our politics have gotten more divided in this country, I think the challenge is, we always find there's a few very loud, as a very vocal minority, but sometimes they speak with the loudest voice, and we have to balance that because we're probably, if we go one way or the other, we may upset another 80% who are staying kind of quiet, but really that's where the membership is at. So we really have to balance that. One thing that's actually helped us on multiple levels throughout the association is, now our not so new CEO anymore, but he was one of our members. He was an active member for more than a decade. He sat on every board position you possibly can. He served as our president until he was asked to serve as CEO. And he really brings that on the ground perspective as a contractor, and is able to sort of give us, help us point us the way forward on certain issues that are kind of tough.
So between the two of you, and Andrew, chime in as appropriate. I think there's some takeaways here. We've obviously just gone through a very tumultuous election. Everyone's on, everyone's hairs are standing up on the back of their neck. But a new beginning is around the corner, and the new administration will be installed, and it's a fresh start. As associations look to their membership and their mission to determine policy positions and what we've learned from 2020, what are those takeaways? I've heard you said engage your first timers or those who've never before been a part of government affairs. Make sure that the positions you're taking are shared and agreed upon by the membership. What are some of those other best practices in the government affairs space that can help associations around the world better engage or convey the ROI of their government affairs? Frank, you use the term ROI. How does government affairs get carried on into the next administration, and how do you use it to grow as an organization?
I think it's that opportunity to engage. I think members look for that opportunity to engage, and then helping them to do that in the right way. As I was alluding to before, there are increasingly, some very vocal folks on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle who don't even get along with the colleagues in their own party, much less, folks on the other side of the aisle, and they think it is their job to go onto cable news networks and to, yell at each other all day long, and that's their way of doing business. And I think most trade associations that are effective are not looking to be the trade association version of that, but instead to play the middle road so that you can talk to both sides of the aisle. Marco and I talk about it all the time. It's not about a Democratic majority or a Republican majority. It's about a NECA majority. Can we put together 218 members of the House, 51 members of the Senate that can help us to move a NECA-friendly agenda forward? Right. And, the way to do that is to always have always speak the truth. Right. I always talk about credibility. I tell this to my kids all the time. They get punished more for lying to me about whatever it is they're trying to hide than whatever thing they're actually lying about. Similarly, if you go to Capitol Hill and you're not going to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, then your credibility is going to take a hit. And if you don't have credibility in Washington, D.C., you don't have anything. Members and policymakers have to know that what you're telling them is the truth. This is how it's actually this policy is actually going to affect my business, my ability to work, whatever the case may be. And if you establish that, and they know that they're going to get the straight talk from you every single time, the straight answers, no BS, they're going to come back to you more and more and more. And it's wonderful to see someone who is like a nascent association activist, first time coming in, grow into somebody who has suddenly a relationship with their member of Congress or their senator where they are talking to each other directly. I'm not even really have to be there anymore, right? I kind of do an introduction, but I barely shake hands. And instead, they're talking, and that member wants to know about how things are impacting them and what can they do to make things better for their industry or for their business. And that is a wonderful thing to see. And those people, as Marco was alluding to before, become great spokespeople for the trade association, where they went from not even knowing, how a bill becomes a law, and I keep this little guy on my desk all the time for that reason, to remind myself about how simple things should be, but how complicated they actually are. But to see them go from that understanding of that limited understanding of Capitol Hill to being somebody who a lawmaker, a member of Congress, has on their speed dial is a wonderful, wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. It starts with credibility. Once you build the credibility with your membership, that takes you so far. And how do you build that credibility? You don't chum the waters. You don't throw out red meat. You really tell the members where things are at. And where things are going. We've always prided ourselves on the notion that I don't need our contractors to turn on the radio or to turn on the news, either, no matter what channel it is, for them to know what's going on the issues that are affecting them. We're the experts, and we'll always tell it to them the way it is. And we've earned that credibility. And so now that we're going into this new administration and a new Washington, the first thing we've done is reassure them that we know how to do this. We've got the playbook down. We were prepared for 8 different scenarios. We do that every 2 years, and we're positive that we're ready, no matter what the outcome was going to be, and we believe we are. And constantly communicate, tell them what's happening, let them know what's going on. I don't want to lead them down a path. So sometimes, we'll hold back when a major piece of legislation is constantly being negotiated. Every few hours, things are changing, but always let them know what's happening. And then with respect to engagement, I think one of the things that I touched on with respect to the notion of, say, the next gen, how do you engage that next group? You lean on your current leaders, and one of the things that we've asked them to do was identify somebody in their company who could be that next person to take over on the advocacy side of things within their company, so to carry the ball forward for when the time comes to have a changing of the guard internally at those companies. So we always have that pool of activists and to have that grow. So I think those are just some key things to address the future.
Well, and that future member, finding that person within your company or your family or your practice. I mean, that should be something that stretches beyond government affairs. Who's that member of the future that will be representative, retain that membership, stay on, and be a consistent voice. I think finding that who will inherit your membership role is a conversation that can be had at so many levels. And Andrew, I'm sorry we've spoken so much kind of Americana in this podcast.
No,
I'm sure things are going just lovely for you over in the UK in terms of government affairs.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said earlier on, I think we're not particularly strong in this area, and yet and yet I only got to mention the B word, Brexit, a post-EU world for us. Now more than ever, our associations need to be learning from what you guys do so well at state and federal level. Also what our colleagues do so well in other parts of the world as well, as you said, in Australia as an example. So yeah, I think we have a lot to learn, and I think taking what we've discussed today, I think there's an opportunity to dissect that more and provide our members, our associations rather, in the UK with quite a few lessons actually. So I would love to have the opportunity to come back and really get down into the detail with some of this with you both. Can I just take this opportunity then to thank Frank and to thank you, Marco. I've been relatively mute today, but believe me, I've taken a lot of information on board, and it's really helped me. And I'm certain it's really going to help our listeners. So thank you very much to both of you. As always, thank you very much to the inimitable Elisa. Always a pleasure. If you have enjoyed listening to today's musings, then you can find us on all the major platforms. And if you do, if you enjoyed listening to the pod and there's a subject you want us to explore, or indeed if you want to join us on the pod, you can tweet us at Association Transformation, or you can email us hello@yourconsort.com, and we'll draw upon either or both the Brewer Pratt Solutions Network or the Consort Strategy Network to pull together a pod that we know will be worth listening to. So until next time, stay well and put your members and your mission first. Association Transformation is brought to you in partnership between Consort Strategy and Brewer Pratt Solutions in support of the Institute of Association Leadership.
Innovate, membership, partnership, agility, communicate, trust. That's impact. A 12-week intensive syllabus for innovative, industrious and inspiring association board leaders. Visit associationtransformation.org for more details and to register for our next programme. Cohorts commence in February, May and September 2021. Impact, a signature programme delivered in partnership by Consort Strategy and Brewer Pratt Solutions.